Welcome to Creepy Chronicles. To ensure you don't miss our next videos, please subscribe to the channel, turn on the bell notification, and remember to leave a comment indicating which city you're viewing from. Thank you very much in advance. Good evening, channel friends. My name is Thomas. I'm 78 years old, and I live alone in a modest little house in the town of Cedar, Florida. My wife, Joanna, died almost 10 years ago, and I've been living alone ever since. My health is very poor now, and my doctor has already told me that I don't have much time left because of cancer. I can feel the cruel beast slowly taking me away, and I know that my time is running out. Although loneliness is an old companion of mine, what hurts me the most isn't the silence in the house. What still aches in my chest is the longing for a son who passed away before me. My wife and I never had any more children, not because we didn't try, but because God wanted it that way. The pain I've carried since that day has never left me. My only son, Ricky, died almost 50 years ago when he was only 6 years old and struck by a car on a dirt road shortly after returning home from school. Our lives were never the same after Ricky passed away, even with my wife Hannah by my side. His absence left a void that we were never able to fill. And as my time nears, that emptiness only gets bigger. He was the light of our home. Not long ago, on one of those chilly July nights, I was lying in bed, feeling the weight of my body, the pain, and the ineffective medications. The wind outside was howling, and the windows were rattling as usual, when I suddenly felt warmth next to me. At first, I thought it was one of those weird dreams I've been having lately, but it wasn't my friend. Instead, I felt a presence that you can't quite put your finger on, but you know for sure that the house was dark, with only the dim glow of the street light coming through the window cracks. And then I heard a whisper, a voice so soft that I nearly thought I was imagining it. Papa. My heart raced that I lifted my eyes and saw my son standing next to my bed, just as he had been before he left us. He had jet black hair and the simple clothes he used to wear as a child. He looked at me, and I swear I saw his eyes shining in the dark. I wasn't afraid. I'm not sure if it was the relief of seeing my boy again, or if it's because I've always hoped for this. My eyes were watering, and my heart was clenched with desire. He approached me gradually, and I felt a cool breeze blow through the room. His tiny hand touched my face, feeling cold like the wind outside, but it also brought me a sense of calm that I hadn't experienced in years. Ricky didn't say anything more, but his eyes were understanding, as if he understood my suffering. Ever since that night, he has been showing up more frequently. Sometimes I see him sitting on the edge of my bed, and other times I hear him running around the house, just like he did when he was younger. Once in the kitchen, I discovered his toy car on the corner of the table. I don't know how to describe it, but I feel like my son is here with me, and when the disease becomes too much for me to handle, he's the one who shows up. He stays with me in silence, as if he's waiting to take me with him when the time comes. The other day, right before I woke up, I heard his little footsteps running through the house. The sound of his feet on the wooden floor was exactly like it used to be when he was a kid, and when I opened my eyes, I saw his toy car, the metal one he loved the most, lying on the floor. Path is kindness. My name is Claire, and I work as a veterinarian in Michigan. This time, I would like to tell you about my father's funeral and some strange things that happened after his death. In late August of 2015, my beloved father was getting close to turning 75, a milestone I was looking forward to because I love old people. Since it was my own father, it was a particularly happy occasion in his home, where there was always a small nook where he liked to sit on the porch and take in the neighborhood view. His house was perched on a hill, providing a stunning view, and we frequently took pictures of my dad, my son, and my mother. I remember some of my co-workers saying how lovely it was that we had such a tradition of taking pictures in the same spot. But almost immediately I had the unsettling thought that this might be one of the last photos we would take together. 1 month later, my dad became ill and was admitted to the emergency room ER for a respiratory condition he had been dealing with for 3 months. He had obstinately refused to seek medical attention, saying he would go when he felt the time was right. My dad was very independent, and no one could change his mind. One Saturday night, my mom called to tell me to hurry to his house because he was very sick and had nearly fainted from lack of rest. My then fiancé and I hurried over, but by the time we got there, my dad had already been taken to the hospital because he had passed out. I saw him intubated and waiting for a room in a designated section of the emergency room. The nurses said he was stable, and after hours passed and it was almost midnight, it was freezing. So we went home for a little while to get him some blankets and warm socks to keep him comfortable. Since my house was close to the hospital, we decided to spend the night there so my mom could sleep early the following morning. At around 7 a.m., I sat in the waiting room waiting for an update on my dad's condition, which had remained unchanged overnight. I noticed a sudden commotion among the hospital staff. Nurses and doctors rushed in and out of his room, carrying various equipment, their faces filled with worry. I watched in dread as one of them entered with a defibrillator at that moment. Knowing I was losing my dad, my mom went home with my son to take care of the animals, a task they hadn't completed the day before because of the chaos surrounding his condition. My mom was scheduled to return to the hospital shortly after I returned. About half an hour later, a doctor came out and called for Mr. John's daughter. I got up and introduced myself, and she looked at me gravely. "Your father was calling for you, and we did everything we could, but he didn't make it. Please wait in the waiting room for 40 minutes, and we'll call you back," she said. I took a deep breath and moved to a bench in a corner of the waiting area where no one else was present. I sat there trying to process the heartbreaking news, try to understand the pain of losing him, and gather the strength I would need to support my mother. My mom arrived, and as soon as she walked through the doorway into the room, I saw my dad standing at the edge of the room, staring at me. It seemed as though he was asking me to take care of her in a silent way. I told my mom what had happened, and she sat next to me devastated. Soon after, my cousins and uncles started coming, and we all tried our best to console her during this trying time. When the doctor called me again, I took care of the paperwork for his body's release, and I asked a nurse I knew if I could see him before he was taken to the medical examiner. He appeared to be lying on a stretcher with a white sheet over his head, his eyes slightly open, his face still wet from perspiration, and a blood stain that persisted on his face even after the nurse tried to wipe it off. As my father had taught me, I handled all the funeral preparations, making sure that nothing burdened anyone else. His body was taken to the cemetery late on Sunday night, and the only people there were my fiancé, a close cousin, and me. My fiancé fell asleep on a nearby couch, and my cousin and I sat on either side of the casket, talking through the night and remembering the wonderful times we had with my dad. Around 2 in the morning, while we were quietly conversing, we both noticed something remarkable. My father's spirit emerged from the casket, wearing the same clothes he had been buried in, looked around the room with a shocked expression, and then lay back down in the casket, closing his eyes. My cousin and I were both shocked and looked at each other to make sure we had seen the same thing. As dawn broke, family members started to arrive, including uncles, aunts, cousins, friends, neighbors, and even children, remembering his humor and the joy he brought to our lives. I stayed by the casket and stroked my father's white hair. A few moments after, I noticed a strong cigarette smoke scent coming from my father's face. It seemed as though he had taken a puff and exhaled the smoke right where I was standing. Later, as I continued to stroke his hair, I felt his head move slightly, and my son, who was standing nearby, confirmed he had seen it too. I thought the supernatural events might stop, but they didn't. Even now, my father's presence is constant in my life. When my mom was staying at the small farm where they had spent much of their later years, the dogs barked relentlessly as if someone was walking around the property. This continued for 2 nights, and during that time, I had a dream in which my father appeared as stern, using the same serious tone he used when he needed to make a point. "Daughter, don't let your mother smoke outside at night with the kitchen door open. There are people walking." The following day, I called my mom to ask if she had been smoking by the open kitchen door at night. She confirmed that she had, and I told her about the dream. She immediately stopped smoking that night, and the dogs barked briefly before ceasing to do so. After that, they were silent. suggesting that the possible intruders had moved on to another time. Then on night, in a dream, my father took me to a tiny village that resembled something from a pastoral painting in a dream, because I was so anxious to find out how he was doing. When I woke up, I thought about the dream and started researching spiritual colonies. He was wearing shorts, a t-shirt, and sandals, exactly the kind of clothes he loved to wear in the summer. He was grinning broadly, appearing younger and healthier, and he showed me around the charming little village where he claimed to live. He seemed so happy as he explained that he was doing well. He told me he couldn't always visit us, but that he would whenever he had the chance. I came to the conclusion that the location he had shown me might be one of them, a serene setting where spirits dwell. On another occasion, I dreamed of him again as we spoke. I asked him, "Tell me how I can find you when I cross over, which path do I take? I don't know where to go," and my father's simple replied, "Path is kindness." The phrase "path is kindness" has stuck with me ever since I had it tattooed on my arm in his honor. One Saturday night, I came home exhausted from the veterinary clinic where I work. After taking a shower, I told my husband that I would take a quick nap and then join him to watch TV. At some point, he came to check on me and woke me up with a question. "Claire, have you smoked? There is such a strong smell of smoke by your side." I checked the porch, and it wasn't coming from the neighbors, so it was just on your side. When I fully woke up, I could smell the strong smell of cigarette smoke coming from my side. However, my husband thought of my father right away because I often feel his presence, even if it's only for a few seconds, and I always know that our bond is something truly special when he's around. What makes this connection even more remarkable is that I'm his adopted daughter. Even though we are not blood relatives, we have a very strong emotional and physical bond that in fact, even in our blood type, when he was alive, we knew that the other person was thinking of us and that if I missed him, he would sense it and call me. In reverse, his death wasn't enough to break that bond. I'm so thankful to God for giving me such a wonderful father and for letting him come see me whenever he can. I appreciate you listening to my story, and I'm honored to share these moments with you. My father's presence still gives me strength and comfort today. Glimpse of past life. Good evening, everyone on the channel. Before I start, I would like to start by saying that I can't sleep without first listening to the stories shared here, because it is such a delicate subject for me. I kindly ask that my name not be revealed. I live in New Jersey, in the countryside. I'm a spiritualist, and I've had contact with spirits at various points in my life. But one of these experiences was so powerful that it has stayed with me ever since. On a weekend night at the end of 2020, I was in my room, lying down, listening to music, with my eyes closed but fully awake when I felt a presence in the room. I thought it might be my son, but when I opened my eyes, I saw something amazing. A tall Native American man stood next to my bed, wearing a simple but colorful headdress made of tiny feathers. His piercing eyes met mine, and without hesitation, he silently extended his hand toward me inexplicably. I took his hand and he led me out of the house. What was most amazing was that there were no physical barriers. The walls and ceiling seemed to vanish as he led me to ask if I had known him for ages. The city had disappeared when we left the house. There were no more streets or buildings, only a verdant forest with gentle light. The greenery, we floated through the forest without ever touching the ground. And after a while, we reached a clearing surrounded by a stream of crystal clear water. The banks were sandy, and the dense forest continued on the other side of the water. The cool shade was refreshing, and the distant sound of birds filled the air. The beauty and tranquility of that place captivated me deeply, and without saying a word, showed me a scene on the other side of the stream among the trees. 3 people, 2 men and a woman with a child in her arms, were African Americans, very thin, and their clothes were in ruins. They crossed the stream and stopped in the clearing slowly, took something out of a bag, ate what little they had, then drank water and laid down near the riverbank. At that point, my guide pointed to specific locations in the forest, and I realized that there were Native Americans hidden there, watching the small group, but they showed no signs of hostility. They were just observing, feeling the vulnerability of the group, who were probably running from something despite my growing curiosity. The guide brought me back home in the blink of an eye, and I was lying in my bed once more, reflecting on the unique experience I had just had, a glimpse into a life, over 2 centuries ago. I fervently hope that one day he will reveal more about that past life and other memories to me, as it would be an honor for my conscience. My guide used thought to communicate with me, revealing something that left me speechless. He told me that I had been a part of that group, and that scene was a memory from one of my previous lives. Thank you for listening my story. I hope you all enjoyed hearing about these spine-chilling experiences from strangers. If you have your own story to share, feel free to send it to my Gmail listed in the description. Your story could be featured and shared with the world. And don't forget to subscribe if you dare.